I do have to ask you, just popped into my head. I remember seeing a video of you and Mike Brecker trying out equipment in like Japan, I want to say. Does that sound right?
Yeah, probably at Ishimori's. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what was that? What was that like? I mean,
Oh, well, hanging out with Mike Brecker for me was quite, uh, you know, special, of course, and being able to, yeah, just to talk and hang out as friends, and but to hear him play, uh, hear anybody that's so great at what they do, it's very inspiring. Because I was always a Mike Brecker fan, of course, and but his trying equipment was very interesting because he was um, very aware of his sound and the what he needed for his personal feeling of what he needed as far as he later on he realized that the sound he wanted was probably not able to get because he used to play a more resistant setup and work very hard and then he had a problem later on where he had to go to an easier setup. So he knew what that feeling he needed, and he had a neck on that was very free blowing, and his setup changed because he needed to have a free blowing setup. Just most amazing sound I've ever heard come out of a horn. But so he was playing a bunch of different horns at Ishimori's, and there were a couple that were just like, whoa. We all went, Mike, that's I like that one, and he goes, yeah, I know, but it was too resistant.
mhm.
So he he always went back to what he knew that was going to work for him. But it's an interesting thing in itself, is because the resistance and the lack of resistance, free blowing creates uh, a more of a simpler sound. More resistance creates more harmonics and stuff going on. So like the balance of sound and what we like to hear is about this balance of resistance, right? If you need to have immediate, easy, really free blowing, and that's what you need, that's going to produce different harmonics on the horn. And opposite, like if you could think of Joe Lovano, right? Joe Lovano plays a very resistant setup. I played his setup years ago, and I would be dead in about 5 minutes trying to play that horn. It took so much energy just to get to read the vibrate. But what was the sound that produces like all this width and harmonics fur and not a lot of point, but a lot of thickness and width, right? And the opposite, if you will, with Mike Brecker, played this Gardella mouthpiece with a free blow and that amazing, beautiful sound, but it had this real centered sort of vibrant sound. It's kind of interesting to hear to see what guys play in terms of that, right? What the equipment produces in terms of efficiency and as opposed to lack of efficiency, right? So the body itself and your willingness or ability to put up with working harder to produce that effect is the question, it seems, right? I can't do that. I just can't I just don't have that much strength or an energy, and I can't articulate as fast, right? And that produces another sense of articulation. So we're talking about a very interesting topic here that I've thought a lot about because of all this interest I have in equipment and how things work together. and this air going through a mouthpiece and over a baffle and having to produce a reed vibration, right? That then goes into a neck and then goes into the horn. The horn itself is more or less just the amplifier, right? And there's differences obviously, but but the most of it's here, right? That's you're buying the neck and how your mouthpiece feels on that neck, right? So that I like this horn, right? So this is a whole area of interest that I've had over the years now that I think that I actually know how to help people with their setups. And a lot of people have necks that are not good. They've either came with the horn and that's the way they are, or they've been compromised. They've been bent up and down over the years, and all the stuff was kind of realized over time, just because I always tried the guy's stuff. Man, let me try your horn, man. Listen, oh man, this is a great horn. Take the neck off and put it on my horn. It's like, oh, it feels the same. Oh, it's the neck. Those kind of experiences are part of my background of like just being around a lot of players that I was able to try their stuff. And I was always asking, hey man, let me try what you play. I hanging out here years ago with Walter Smith and just ridiculous, beautiful sound. And Walter, can I play your setup? And I was like, what? How are you playing this? And he goes, I know, man. That's like, he learned how to play a neck that was bent down, and very out of tune. For me, it was, but he learned how to play it in tune, and it created this thing. So, like, who am I to say that that's not a good setup? But that's kind of an outlier, right? There's a guy with so much talent that's just painting, right? And learned how to use the tools that he had to make that sound, and that's pretty cool, right? Because the imagination and the talent overrides everything, right? And there's all kinds of analogies that you can make. If you're a great heart surgeon and you're out in the middle of the woods and you have an X-Acto knife, you will be able to save a life because you know what you're doing, right? But is it the ultimate way you want to do heart surgery? Probably not. So. I like the idea of being able to get to what you need to get, and so you could, have fun, not work so hard. And a lot of players are working really hard because they think that's the way to get their sound. And within a range, kind of true, because the resistance and versus lack of resistance is what we're talking about. Is airflow, from your body and through creating. Guys that want to play a link that don't know how to produce an embouchure here and create an internal baffle with their tongue, right? Cannot play a link. They can't do it. It sounds stuffy to them, right? And so there's all this stuff I've realized over the years. It's like, what are we talking about here? Like how players characterize what's good and bad is basically inaccurate, to say it nicely, right? There's a lot of bullshit, right, about what it is that produces sound, and who am I to say it? Because I can say this stuff now because I think I understand what I asked the same questions. I really didn't know, right? I didn't know what it is to produce a sound. And all I know is that the greatest players that I grew up hearing, that I learned a lot from, all studied with Joe Allard, right? And I know you had Gary Keller on, who was a purveyor of Joe's, all of Joe's stuff. But if you talk to like 10 different Joe Allard students, they would have different ways to characterize it. right? But that is something that I think I've learned Joe Allard's approach by listening and asking questions and trying to distill it into my own way of explaining it, right? So that's something that's really fun and interesting, that knowledge, as far as when it comes to teaching, especially, and
Yeah, we definitely have to to get into that at some point. I Before we go, I do want to say that that the point you made about getting the tongue up and forward and creating that internal baffle was huge for me. I remember hearing you talk about that, hiss like a cat and then move the tongue forward. And I played on an auto link for about 15 years, and I got a pretty bright sound. And I had a lot of people that would come up to me and say, "What kind of baffle do you have in that mouthpiece?" And there's no baffle, nothing in there, and it was all internally, and it was from that exact thing that you said that allowed me to get closer to the sound that I was looking for, and it was a much more focused sound. And yeah, as everybody knows,
well, the baffle, you're creating the baffle with your
right,
tongue. So how I just really simple and really quick. It's like playing sax. If I knew this again when I was younger, it's whistling, right? I can't whistle. What's going on when you whistle? Well, this is coming down away from the reed. But when you whistle high, what's happening? Your tongue's going high. When you're whistling low, your tongue's going low. Well, what's the deal there? Well, it's the same as water coming through from your house through a hose. Turn the water on. The water just flops out of the big hole, right? And then you put your thumb on the end of that hose, and the water goes 10 feet, right? So what is that? That's creating a smaller aperture. For the same amount of water is going through that smaller aperture, going faster, right? And then, so that's a beautiful correlation of what has to happen internally with our tongue. Ah, same thing, right? Right? And if you whistle, that's fast, cool air. You can't whistle today. Slower, warmer air, right? That's what happens. That needs to happen on the range of the horn. As you go higher, your tongue goes higher, faster air, and Gary had I was watching his thing, incredible, about the reed vibration, just the mouthpiece and the reed, right, producing all the notes, going from high to low. That's right, because the reed has to vibrate at the right frequency here, right? Now, if you're too tight, right, biting down here, you're not only are you you're stopping the very vibration that you need to play, right? The reed's everything. That produces your sound, right? So if you're biting, you're cutting off that reed vibration, and you get into kazoo land, right? So you need to let the reed vibrate freely, but what happens with that? It's like you go out of tune, right? So the octave key is not. Of course, this is the register key, but the register key is here, right? Because if you just play, I'm not changing anything, right? It's flat. That's the saxophone. That's what a saxophone does. Totally. Right? Right? So we hear that when we're young. We go, that's terrible. We got to do something to tune it up. Right? So what do we do? What did I do? You tighten up. right? I tightened up, brought the pitch up, but then what happened to the sound? It went into nasal land, right? Because as I tighten up, the reed is collapsing. The reed is not vibrating. So then you go, then I didn't know any of this stuff. This is all Joe Howard shit, right? He might not have explained it just like this, but you want to get a beautiful resonant. Well, you want to keep it resonant, but without tightening, you want to get, here's my tongue, right? So I'm trying to, I just lost my keyboard. I'm trying to minimize the firming. Of course there's firming. As you go up, there's got to be some firming. Here's the embouchure, right? Like from low to high, could be like that. Right? Right? But a lot of people are starting here, right? They're starting too tight, right? And that's where that mouthpiece exercise really demonstrates the frequency of the reed vibration of what needs to happen. Because if you need to play that, but if you're vibrating, you've got the pressure that's a fourth above that for that C, it's too tight, right? So this flexibility needs to be practiced, and no one ever taught me this stuff, right? It was about like what, So it's very interesting stuff, man. And I love hearing a guy like Gary and others talk about this stuff because it's so not. There's a real lack of understanding of what it is that needs to happen, right? And man, I tell you, I come across the most incredible players, and they're playing sharp all the time, right? They're both playing out of tune, and they've got into these habits of playing equipment that doesn't actually function, but they like the sound because it creates resistance. It creates complexity in the sound. But, playing a reed that's too hard for the facing creates, like, you need to bite, right? And you bite, and what happens to the pitch when you bite?
Go sharp.
Go sharp, right? So you learn, because you like the sound, you learn how to play sharp. Well, no. As you can see from my cup, you cannot play out of tune. That's one of the most basic things. As a musician, you need to learn how to play in tune. I'm sorry, it's unacceptable. No one wants to play with you if you're out of tune. Nobody, right? And you can play the badass shit, incredible stuff, and they go like, oh yeah, that guy plays out of tune. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. Yeah. So